Lifelines actually came out of a discussion that I had 3 years ago with a friend who used to work at Zuban Books in New Delhi. And her idea was that we would like to have a new collection of writing from Bangladesh on the bookshelves in India and in India and hopefully also for Europe. And we had a very clear sense of what we wanted. My own desire was to have a collection of stories that really reflected the reality of contemporary Bangladesh, in the sense that there are a lot of stereotypes about Bangladesh, about poverty, misery, violence, and of course that is part of the story. But it's not the whole story. There are many other things happening. We have had in the last year 2 women from Bangladesh who have climbed Mount Everest. We have the women who are working in the garments factories and propagating their own very quiet social revolution, because we see them on the streets and they are in a public space as a presence. So those were some of the realities, and also the reality of migrant Bangladeshis, because Bangladeshis can be found all over the world today. And I wanted the stories in Lifelines to reflect that reality. So initially when I was asked to do this collection, to edit it, I was very keen to have the book done, but I was not keen to do it myself. So I suggested that perhaps they could get somebody else to be the editor, and I would help this person put the stories together. And so the discussions went back and forth for, I think, 2 years. And then finally I realized that if I didn't decide to do this myself, it was just not going to happen now. So I took it on, and it took about 1.5 years, and approximately 6 rounds of revision per story, 14 stories by other writers and 1 of my own, and we brought out the collection at the end of last year. As I said, one of the main criteria was for it to be contemporary fiction, but Zuban also had certain other criteria. As a niche press, they wanted women writers in this collection, so it's actually a collection of women's writing, although the subjects are, some of the stories are told from male perspectives, a lot of male characters, and the 3 criteria were essentially that the stories would be written by women, that they would be stories originally written in English. There are no translations in this collection. And that it would showcase a newer generation of writers. So it was 45 and under, with as far under as possible being the preferred criteria. And with that in mind, I was initially a little apprehensive about whether we would get a sufficient number of good stories for the collection, but actually I am very proud of what we've come up with so far. I think the youngest person is 27. And it is her first international publication. She has written before in Bangladesh, and in some of the newspapers they do supplements and so on. But yes, I think the youngest person is 27. Yes, the story is actually a very sweet, simple little story, and I liked it because, as I said, I think there are very many stereotypes that people grapple with. And one of the things that I wanted to cover in this collection was that it should not only be urban stories, because when we're talking about English language writers, you often see quite a strong urban bias. So I wanted to make sure that we had some stories that were set in rural settings, some in peri-urban, small towns and so on. And this particular one is set very much set in Dhaka at a party. And it's about somebody, it's called B. And it's about somebody who comes into this party feeling very insecure and very self-conscious, and suddenly, the way that she describes, it's a very short piece, I think it's 1 page, and she says, suddenly my left leg shot out, and before I knew it, my right hand followed it. And as the reader, you're wondering what's going on. And basically, somebody plays a very infectious dance number, and before she knows it, she starts dancing, and everybody else is dancing, and at the end she realizes that actually a lot of her panic was in her head. And as women, that's something we very frequently experience, to be perfectly honest. So it's quite good to have the sense that it's not always as bad as you think, So that was her story. Essentially, what I wanted to do was something different. So, for example, within Lifelines, we have a couple of stories which have what you might consider more traditional themes. One is about a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, and you read this story, and it's from the 2 perspectives of one from the mother-in-law, one from the daughter-in-law. And you are thinking, oh, well, this is a very old story in a way. The tension between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, a legend in South Asia, not only in Bangladesh. And at the end of the story, there is a twist, which makes you realize that the whole story as you were reading it is not as it appears. So that was one of the things I looked for, that I don't mind having a theme that's traditional, but I wanted to offer the reader something new, something that was not expected. So for stories that showed a degree of originality in either stylistically or in terms of the plot, I looked for that. Another was I wanted to pick up on some of the motifs which are very Bengali and Bangladeshi, but without making it so obvious. So for example, one of my favorite stories in this collection is called Touch Me Not. And it is about, it's a very interesting story about a young American woman who goes to live in a Bangladeshi town with a Bangladeshi family. It's told from the perspective of a male protagonist because he was a little boy when this volunteer came to live with them. And she leaves very suddenly, and he never really understands what happened. Many years later, he goes to America to study for a PhD or something of this nature, and he encounters the same woman, but under very different circumstances. She's now a politician, and he finds out both what the backstory was, why she left, but he also finds out what that period of time meant to her, because in one segment in the story, he's her guide around their village and their town and their home. So he shows her all the things that are treasured by a little boy, the frogs in the pond and so on and so forth. And one of the things he shows her is the Lojjabuti, which I'm sure many people in India will also have seen. It's a fern, really tiny kind of fern, and if you touch any one of the segments, it just closes very quickly. And so it's called the shy girl, basically. And that's where the touch me not comes from but there is a deeper meaning in it, but that's where it comes from. So those were some of the things. Another thing for my own story, which is called Getting There. And I think, increasingly in metro India, you will see this phenomenon. In Bangladesh, because we don't have that many metros, it's still not very common that for people to leave, let's say if they want to leave something behind them, an unhappy childhood or some part of their family life, it's quite difficult to do that still, because you are still very much identified by who your family is, which part of the country you're from, and so on. So that story is about a young woman who wins an architecture scholarship from Chittagong, which is a more conservative part of the country, to Dhaka, which is relatively liberal. And she has a very difficult relationship with her family. She decides to leave, and she makes a new life for herself in Dhaka. She's intelligent, there are opportunities, she takes them. And then something happens which requires her to go back to her family home in Chittagong, and she ends up having to look after her two nieces, whom she barely knows because she's avoided going home in the middle. And so this is really about a theme that I think in some ways is quite universal, which is the complicated aspects of family relationships and what we cherish and what we struggle with. And how we come to terms with it, in a way. So there is something universal about that story, but it is also very particular to her childhood, the society that she grows up in, the choices that she makes, in a way. And the punchline, if you want to call it that, is, I suppose, she finds out that things were not as she thought they were. So it's how you go back as an adult to revisit certain experiences, and it becomes clear that maybe, what you thought was the case is not quite as simple. You see things very black and white in childhood, whether it's your siblings or your parents. And getting there, even the title actually reflects that, because it's about that process of getting to a clearer understanding of who you are, why you are who you are, and how to come to terms with the relationships that are important in your life. One more thing that I wanted to have very clearly reflected in this book is that when you have a series of female contributors, there is a tendency to kind of write it off as women's writing. And I was very conscious that I did not want this book to be women's writing, whatever that means. So I did look out for stories that were told either from a male perspective, which happens in two of the stories. I also looked at stories with very strong male or child characters, because I wanted it not just to be about women. And the final theme that I looked out for, which I touched on earlier, was this issue of migration. So the stories are not all set in Bangladesh. They are all about Bangladeshis, but they are, one is a very young child who's growing up in Addis Ababa, whose parents work with the UN. And so she's very confused because she goes to an American school, she lives in Ethiopia, and her parents are Bangladeshi, So these kind of contradictions and complexities of the 21st century global identity, who we are, and so on. Another story, because I also wanted the bigger world to be reflected in these stories, is about a young male taxi driver in New York. The story is called Yellow Cab, and it's basically about this man who came to the US to study, did well, became an investment banker, and then 9/11 happened. And there were many fallouts from 9/11, but one of them was also for Muslims in high-profile situations who found themselves very uncomfortable because they were seen as part of the enemy. Not, of course, always, but I know of several cases myself. So in this case, he loses his job, and he ends up as a cab driver, which is, you know, not what he has. This is not the American dream he has come to pursue. And yeah, so some of these bigger themes are also reflected in. It's very much a 21st century collection, I would say. You know, I think labeling is inevitable because that's just how we make sense of the world around us. And we do live in a post-colonial world, and we do live in a, you know, post-conflict world in some ways. Speaking of specific conflicts, there are of course continuous conflicts going on. I think that is part of the background of the stories, but I did not choose to eliminate them consciously, but I also chose not to focus on them. I did not choose to make this collection about 1971 because 1971 looms heavily over us still, but it is also positioned in history. Bangladesh as it is today, there are a million other stories happening which have relatively little to do with 1971. You know, even the rewriting of history means that there are people within the younger generation who are perhaps slightly confused about what actually happened and so on. So I think that, you know, that's part of it. I'm not sure how much of it you will find in this particular collection. There was one story which I wanted to include, but I could not in the end because the writer, she would have been the youngest contributor, I think. I think at the time she was 25. And I very much wanted to include her story, but the reason that I couldn't was because it required extensive editing, and I simply didn't have the time, given the time frame we had. And what I liked about the story, that one was set in 1971, and it's about, I like the ingenuity of her plot because it's about a young woman who discovers that her husband is a collaborator with the Pakistani forces, and she doesn't know this until quite some time into the story. In the end, I think perhaps it's not a bad thing that I could not include the story because it would have been the one story that's set much further back in time, and it may have been a slightly uncomfortable fit. I would have found a way, I think, to say that this is part of our history going forward, but yes, I felt that, you know, when the writers brought certain things to bear in the stories, those could be left there, but they were not the focus of this particular collection. We have a lot of writing on 1971, even in English, and on partition as well. So I think that has been done to quite a significant extent, which does not, you know, there is no end to those stories either, and their relevance. I think they are still very relevant, but I don't think that they are undertold, if you will. I think the story of contemporary Bangladesh is very much undertold. Well, I think that, you know, we have to walk a very careful balance that way. I think part of accepting who you are and being comfortable in your own skin is accepting what's happened in the past. But, you know, knowing about your past and dwelling on it are two different things, you know. So I think in terms of human well-being, in a much broader sense, I don't think that living in the past or holding on to past enmities or histories is a very constructive thing. I think you need to say that, okay, let's say if we talk about partition, you know, the scars of partition are still very much alive. For my parents' generation, you know, they lived through it. And I have met particularly Bengalis, many Bengalis on both sides of the border, with a tremendous haunted sense of loss and longing for their deshir bari or their, you know, their ancestral home that they have never perhaps seen. And sadly, if they went there now, they probably wouldn't recognize it, you know, because so much has happened in the interim. And I don't quite know what the answer is, because I think at one level it's almost like a phantom limb. You know, it's gone, but you can feel it. On the other hand, I think there is also something to be said for, in a way, finding a way to come to terms with it. Go there. If you really want to, go there, see it, face the fact that it's not what, you know, your grandmother said about the paddy fields outside their home and, you know, the pukur where they went swimming and so on. But maybe you'll find something else. Maybe you'll make new friends. You know, maybe something good will come out of that journey. And it's better to make that journey than to live in a past where they threw us out or we threw them out and we had this property. We've all experienced that, you know, some home somewhere that has been left by someone, and we hear the stories and so on. So I think the best way to deal with it, and there is no single way, of course, is that you learn your history and you accept your history, and then you recognize the world in which you live today and what the issues are today, and then you find a way of coming to terms with all of it. You know, I mean, I'm a great believer in building bridges. across communities or countries or so on, because I really think that, and in fact doing Lifelines reinforced that for me, that I do believe that there are certain universal themes that make us human. You know, there are particularities of whether you live in India or whether you live in Europe. The kind of family you will have grown up in may be very different. The structure, the ways that you celebrate your festivals and so on. What is not different probably are the troubles that any family experiences in terms of, let's say, a parent's expectations of their child, or let's say a child's relationship to their parents, where they feel that they didn't have enough of this, so they had too much of that. You know, these frustrations and the disappointments and the joys and the love are very much common, I think, to all of us as human beings. And it's when we choose to focus on the differences, whether you say Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Buddhist or white or black or, you know, East Asian, we choose to focus on the differences because somehow it makes us feel more secure in who we are and the idea that we are better. Whereas I actually think I find the world to be a much more welcoming and enjoyable place when I can actually engage with the diversity around me and choose to enjoy that and celebrate it. I've been really delighted by how the book has been received. You know, Zuban is a small publishing house, and so you know, the publicity and promotion aspect of it has been limited to personal resources and some help from them. And despite that, actually, the book has been quite well received, I think, in India in particular, because we have had, I have been invited this year to the APJ Kolkata Lit Fest, to the Kolkata Lit Meet, to the Hindu Lit for Life Festival in Chennai, and to Bangalore and Shillong. And it's been wonderful to have the opportunity to promote the book and also speak a little bit about my country, and to see the engagement from readers as well. And actually even outside of South Asia, because I recently had an email from an academic who teaches at the State University of New York, and they have been teaching an international literature course, and 3 of the stories from Lifelines, mine and 2 others, Yellow Cab, which I mentioned earlier, and another story called Pepsi, which is about the little girl in Ethiopia. These 3 have been chosen for the syllabus of this international literature course, along some very serious heavyweights like Jhumpa Lahiri and so on. So we are very honored by that. And Penguin has been responsible for the distribution. So I think through Flipkart and Penguin, the book is actually very widely available and has been available at the festivals as well. So I'm very happy about that reception.